Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about trap rangers, specifically condition damage trap rangers. I've been having a lot of fun running this build in World vs. World. The main thing that got me to looking back at trap rangers was the updates to the way conditions work. Two specific updates. Number one, that they no longer cap at 25 bleeds, for example, and number two, that poison and burning now stack intensity 2, meaning if you have enough like reapplications of those two conditions, you can stack a lot more damage. And what this basically means is when you run not just one trap ranger but multiple trap rangers at the same time, their damage continues to scale higher and higher and higher. ArenaNet kind of designed traps in a really interesting way in Guild Wars 2. They made a lot of changes from how they worked in the first game. In the first game, you could spam tons of traps up and cooldown reduction skills so that you could trap and trap and trap and trap and have like a billion in a single spot. Someone would walk over it, they'd explode and they would die. And I guess ArenaNet were really scared of that concept when they looked at Guild Wars 2, especially the fact that they had World vs. World, and they didn't think that would be particularly fun gameplay. But it is fun. It's damn fun. And now that they've changed the way conditions work, we can get a little bit of that back. Yes, you can still only have one trap of any type out at one time. But now, if you have a lot of players, having 50 traps all on one spot suddenly means a lot more. Suddenly, all those overlapping burns, poisons, and even bleeds beyond 25 are still accounting for damage. And it turns out, actually, if you really play into it, even as just a solo trapper, you can nuke people out very quickly if they're on super squishy builds. It's some really interesting gameplay. It's got a lot of counterplay to it too, and I think from both sides of the coin, it actually spices up the kind of gameplay we experience out there in World vs. World. So that's primarily what this build is. I see no use for it in PvE, as usual. Some people used to run trap rangers in PvP. I think maybe you'll see the occasional trap out there every now and then, but really I don't want to talk about those formats. I'm talking about World vs. World for here, and specifically just running around roaming, having a bit of fun. So I'm not actually going to spend very long on certain sections of this video. The gear we're running is Sinister, so I've just loaded up on Sinister stuff. This is the same Sinister gear you actually saw my Elementalist running on a previous video, and other Condi sets will work too. Rangers primarily do condition damage with their traps. Again, in my opinion, a thing from ArenaNet early on, they thought condition damage was attritive, so that would be best suited to traps instead of just giant explosions. But the truth is, in 2 or 3 ticks worth of Condi damage, you can kill people on this, so that's pretty cool, right? We're running Condi damage, Sinister stuff. Other Condi sets will work. I've gone Sinister specifically, though, because it's got a bit of power, and that helps break through some counterplays some people will have, though I'll discuss that a little bit later. For sigils, I am running a Doom sigil on my main hand, and I'm running Corruption with Bursting. So the idea here being that you can stack up a ton of Corruption for even more condition damage, and then make sure you have your Bursting weapon out for when you actually lay down the damage. And again, we'll talk about that very soon too. Moving straight into traits, I don't want to hover too long on these. I'm traiting 3 ways: Wilderness Survival, Skirmishing, and Marksmanship. Now, Skirmishing is your most important one because the first trait you're going to take, the Adept one, is Trapper's Expertise. Boons and conditions caused by traps will last longer, traps recharge faster, and the offensive ones also cause cripple. Then we're also taking Hidden Barbs, which means our bleeds just straight up do more damage. And we're taking Light on our feet, which means that when we dodge roll, we gain a buff, which increases our condition damage. So as you can see here, also has a bit of synergy with the short bow, which I'll talk about in just a second. So that's the really important one, Skirmishing. Also, I'm taking Wilderness Survival. This one's fairly strong too. This gives us regeneration when we are inflicted with a negative Condi of our own. The other 2 are optional if you want them. Ambidexterity, which means when we have a torch or a dagger in our offhand, we have another 150 Condi damage, and this build is running the torch. And lastly, Poison Master, which just like Hidden Barbs, this means our poison does loads more damage, and we're actually inflicting a little bit more through our pets too. So those are those 2 specializations. The last one's kind of optional. I've gone with Marksmanship though, and I've gone with Marksmanship because of this buff here, Opening Strike. We have this passively on us. Our next attack isn't an Opening Strike, and Opening Strikes will be causing Vulnerability. Vulnerability is great on condition builds now because, oh, what do you know, they increase condition damage. So that's kind of why we've got Marksmanship. So we've got Call of the Wild. This is a blast when we swap pets, and this is going to be really useful for our rotations. I'll talk about it in a second. We're going to be taking Steady Focus, damage increase while endurance is full. This is like the worst trait, really. You can maybe take Moment of Clarity if you like, in case you get a lucky unlucky interrupt on one of your traps, which will help you a bit more. But generally, for the longer fights, maybe steady focus is a bit better. And the Grandmaster here, we're taking Remorseless, which is, again, regain opening strike whenever we get Fury. And then that's even more Vuln. So we're actually going to be putting out 10 Vuln very, very easily. Let me turn down the dialogue volume because the Lion's Arch Tor is coming through. That's wonderful, isn't it? Alright, so there you go. Those are your traits. Let's talk about the traps themselves. The traps are really cool. So, you've got a selection of traps. We're actually running the Trap Heal, which I'll talk about very soon. This is Healing Spring. We're taking Spike, Flame, and Viper's Nest. These are the 3 traps that we're going to be taking. To go through them in order, Viper's Nest, first of all, is the most basic one. Remember, all of these are unblockable. In fact, our elites are unblockable too, so this is pretty nice and prevents some counterplay. But this is going to be a poison field, puts a ton of poison out. With the help of our pet, you can get like 11 poison instantly on a target, which is quite nice. The flame trap, this one's a fire field, and puts out a ton of burning. This is much stronger now because the burning will continue to stack intensity. The fire field can be nice for blasting might, but don't forget you've also got a poison field down. So you should always cast with the flame trap first, then the poison, then the Viper's Nest, and I believe you'll still be able to blast in the Flame Trap. And lastly, we've got Spike Trap. Spike Trap's kind of an interesting one because the main distinction between Thief Traps and Ranger Traps historically in the game has been that Thief Traps are kind of, they have a different shape, but they're one-time activation. Like, they'll pop and they'll do their thing and that's it. While Ranger Traps hit the ground and continue to pulse as AoE. So here, I'll show you guys what this looks like on this Basilisk here, for example. We'll drop the Flame Trap, and not only will it put out some burn, but it will continue stacking burn out there, so we end up with 4 burns that continue ticking down, and we get some reasonable damage just from that one trap. So that was the difference. But Spike Trap changed. Spike Trap used to be kind of weird. When you traded for traps, it would give you Immobilize. Now Spike Trap is a lot more like those Thief Traps I was just talking about, in that it will only strike once. No longer does it Immobilize, it knocks down. So this is where you can get that interrupt for that trait I was talking about just a second ago. But it's an unblockable knockdown that will put 6 bleed immediately onto the targets that are struck by it. So you see these guys fall down, but nothing else is pulsing on these guys anymore. We've got this Mesmer attacking them, but the Spike Trap's done. So it's a little bit different now, and your placement of the Spike Trap has to be quite important therefore too, because if you lay all 3 of your traps on top of one another, and then say someone dodge rolls onto them, they're going to evade the entire pulse of the Spike Trap, and they're not going to get bled, and they're not going to get knocked down or anything like that. So really what you want to do is place your Flame and Viper's Nest, and then move back a little bit, and maybe put your Spike Trap somewhere around here. So if someone does dodge roll into your trap, so you use a variety of other things, their dodge roll kind of stops, hopefully here, they get knocked down, they get bled, and they're still in the radius of the previous ones, and they get hit for that too. So you want to be careful with the Spike Trap. Likewise, you want to be careful with this. If someone's approaching from this angle, they'll get knocked down and bled, but not hit any of the other AoEs, and then they'll run away. So you have to be careful there too with your placement. So anyway, those are your 3 main damaging traps. There is another one Rangers have available to them. That's the Frost Trap. Frost Trap doesn't do any offensive conditions, but it does have a higher base damage. And this guy just hit into this one. But it does have a higher base damage. So for our build, Frost Trap's really not that great. But if you were to run, say, a Zerk setup, and this is something I'm interested in and something you might see on the channel at some point in the future, where you just do tons of raw damage with the traps, Frost Trap is probably the one that you want to go for there. Now you might say, oh, but Wooden Potatoes, Frost Trap comes with chill as well, and that can keep people in your traps. Well, the truth is, since the update where movement skills ignore, cripple, and chill and stuff, people are just gonna like dodge roll through the out of the trap range anyway. The chill really doesn't matter to them at that point, and they already have cripple on them regardless. So the Frost Trap generally isn't what you want. The other ones that are doing a lot of damage are much more important. I will talk for a quick second here about our food. Now, food I run with Koi Cake, which is completely overpowered, and the existence of it breaks the necessity for many sigils and things in the game. ArenaNet need to nerf these. I run Koi Cake, which is 40% condition duration, and quality tuning crystals. So you get 40% condi duration from the Koi Cakes, and then because of our traits, we get a further 60% from Trapper's Expertise. What does that mean? We've hit the cap of double condition duration on all of these just from Koi Cake and that one trait. Yeah, it's overpowered. So we're running Koi Cake and then just one of these tuning crystals for even more condition damage. Now then, back to Lion's Arch, since we don't really need to demo so much stuff. I do want to talk a little bit about the Healing Spring very soon. The Healing Springs are really interesting skills, got a lot of quirks, because this changed a lot since the update, and it became a trap itself, but we'll deal with that shortly later. Last thing really to talk about is your Elite for this side of the skill bar. Entangle just makes a lot of sense. It's a mob, so it can kind of pick up the slack that Spike Trap won't anymore. It's a bunch more bleeds. Again, it's unblockable, so it can be nice for when you drop a bunch of traps, people are caught in them, and you can entangle them. Just all around a really strong skill. There are other elites, though, available. If you're a Sylvari, the Invuln elite might have some use. You can kind of have a little bit more fun with this slot. It's not so strict, but Entangle just makes an awful lot of sense. In fact, it seems like early on it was designed to be a trap before it became a survival. Of course, because we're a ranger, we have pets as a part of our build too. I run the wolf because the wolf is completely overpowered. It has an incredible knockdown on the auto attack that you will just accidentally get all the time. And it has, of course, the fear if you go down stage is really, really strong. But the other really important pet to run is the Jungle Stalker. Jungle Stalker is great because it gives you might. And I'm going to talk a little bit about might very shortly. But this guy is super useful. Also fairly high DPS. So just kind of a nice pet all around. Talking about weapons. Now, on my bar, you'll see right now, I've got axe in both slots. And I've got a torch and a warhorn. There are merits to other ranger weapons. Shortbow is great. As you see, we already have a trait for shortbow. You're not going to always be like directly in melee range with people on this build. Not when you're running it in World vs. World. And shortbow is really good for chasing people down. It has that lovely bleed on the auto attack, and you're already doing a lot of condi damage. It's also got a bit of survivability, the evade, the daze or stun. It's pretty nice. Sword also is really good. It's got fantastic mobility. It's got decent evade frames on it, and again, it's a little bit more condi damage. So sword is really cool too. In fact, in PvP, you'd never find a ranger on traps running axe in both main hands, and I'm not really recommending you do that either. I just like it for the extra bleeds, and I couldn't be bothered to craft another weapon. The really important one, though, is Torch. Torch in your offhand is super powerful. 9 stacks of burning just from using Bonfire. Bonfire is useful for a wide range of things. It's a fire field for might, and even the 4 on it as well. Those 2 stacks of burns at range, again, are really powerful. That combos even further with your flame trap. This is a synergy that never existed on the game before, when burning used to stack duration, not intensity. That's fantastic, and you can run Dagger offhand for your other set to, again, get the benefit of the trait, or you can run Warhorn, which is what I like to do for even more might. And the might is going to be great for when you snare people. So, even for a bit of sustain, because your heal skill is, again, also a water field, which you can blast in. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the usage of this build. What you've been seeing in footage flashing up as the video has been going along. So, here's the idea. You're going to set up a bunch of traps in an area in World vs. World. There's no one going to be around, and then you're going to wait. You're going to put the trap somewhere you're pretty sure people will eventually go, either because they're coming to try and kill you, or because you can kind of predict what they're doing and where people will move. And you can influence that in some cool ways as well, I'll talk about soon. So you set your traps up, and then what you're going to try and do is hide, ideally. You're going to get away, so they really have no idea anything's about to happen. Then when they hit the traps, you're going to try and buff yourself to an insane degree with tons of might. They're going to get a whole heap of condis on them, and they're going to get burned down in a short matter of time. If they don't, you're going to engage with all of your cooldowns up, and then you're going to kill them. So how do we accomplish this? Well, while you're in waiting, what you want to do is have your torch ready. Now, the torch is the weapon set you want to open the fight with. You get additional condi damage while you're on it, but what you want to do is drop the initial bonfire as they're moving to the traits. Once you have the bonfire down, you can swap to your Warhorn, and your weapon swap cooldown won't be high. You'll still be able to freely move back whenever you like. At this point, they'll hit the trap, and you're going to blast with Warhorn 5 to give yourself might. In fact, you can do that slightly before they hit the trap too. So as you go in, you're already going to, as they hit those traps, you're already going to be at full might. And for those of you who don't know, might will retroactively, as you continue to boost your might, it will just keep bumping up your condition damage, no matter how far away the enemies are. So they could be like 2,000 range away from you, but as long as you're buffing yourself with might, that will be increasing the damage you do to people all that distance away. So you're going to be getting 4 might from that, and at the same time you want to have your stalker out, and you press your F2 as well, which is another 5 might. So it's really simple. This is just as they're moving in. You give yourself all this might. Then, when they hit the traps, you go into combat. You're going to weapon swap, and weapon swapping does several things at this point. First, it procs your Doom Sigil. Doom is your next attack after you swap to this weapon will inflict poison. That only works while you're in combat, but that poison will be inflicted because you're ticking damage out on them in those traps miles away. So even though you're so far away, you're getting even more poison damage thrown out on them. So that will proc this. This will also put you back onto your Sigil of Bursting. This will also put you onto the trait that gave you an extra 150 condi damage. All the might is buffing your condi damage. And then last of all, you're going to swap your pet. Now, swapping your pet will give, while you're in combat, it won't work while you're not in combat, but while you're in combat, if you swap your pet back over to your wolf, you will blast again another Call of the Wild, which is another 4 might, so you get even more might. And lastly, just to top it off, you're going to dodge roll. And by dodge rolling, you get light on your feet, which is even more condition damage. So you're going to have very, very high condition damage. That sounded very complicated. It's really not. You just press F2 and 5, then you weapon swap, they hit the trap, and you press 5, then you pet swap and dodge roll. And weapon swap back. There you go. That's everything. And you won't see all the might there because I wasn't in combat. You won't see everything roll. But that puts out just insane damage. This also doubles up on your opening strikes, which puts 10 vuln out. Because the first time they hit the traps when you initially go in combat, they will get 5 vuln on them. And then when you pet swap later, you're giving yourself Fury, which is another opening strike, which will then instantly proc on them again, assuming they're still on the trap. So there is a bit of timing. There is a bit of skill to it. But should you be able to do it, you will have an insane amount of condi damage. Just considering your bursting sigil, you should have 25 corruption at that point. The numbers can go very, very, very high. The example you see on the screen right now is just kind of your base wandering around. So yeah, but that's just the start. This will kill a lot of very squishy players, as you've been seeing, like thieves and things will just melt instantly. There are some classes, though, a lot of people will survive this. If people have got any modicum of defense in their gear whatsoever, they'll probably have the vitality shrug stuff off, and that's when you simply move in. Now, the beauty of traps are that you can drop all of your traps, as I'll do here. The traps will stay on the field for the shortest duration one, I think, is 1 minute 30 seconds. So you're going to snare your area, you're going to set up your trap nest. Once you've made your nest, you're going to leave it. And then 1 minute 30 later, if nobody's popped it, you walk back in and you replace your traps. But long before that minute 30 is up, you see my traps are already ready. I can be far away, you know, I can walk over here in Lion's Arch right now and be waiting for someone to hit those traps. And I'm fine, right? So as soon as they hit the traps, I do my little rotation with my weapon stuff here and my pet swapping. But all of these cooldowns are up. So if the person then is like, oh, I just completely countered you, or I've survived all of your traps, and they come running for you, you can immediately drop a bunch more traps and do a whole ton more damage. So you are really starting in this big advantage. It's definitely this kind of trapping, interesting playstyle where you rig the land in your advantage, and you can do a lot of cool stuff. All that said, you're very squishy, and sometimes, quite frequently even perhaps, you can, especially in Wild vs. Wild where you can be hugely outnumbered, you can get in a lot of trouble. And what do you have for safety here? You're looking at this bar and you're saying wooden potatoes, where you have got nothing. You've got barely any cleanse. You do have fairly good condi cleanse from your healing spring, but you've got barely any sustain. You've got no real evades, especially friggin', I mean, I'm not actually recommending double axe, but even if you're on swords, you don't have too much survivability. Well, that's where I laugh and say, aha, look at the runes. So, not only do these traps do all this damage and stuff, but you will have been noticing throughout this video, I'm also getting stealthed every time I drop them. In fact, if I drop all of my traps in order, I get about 12 seconds of stealth, like a lot of stealth. Not only this, but I also get a ton of super speed. These are all thanks to the trap runes. Trap runes are really, really strong now. Now, when they first came in the game, they were kind of laughed at a little bit. And I'll explain why. But they're good, first of all, for the stats they're giving us. They're giving us condition damage, and that's exactly what we were on a run with. When it comes to Dragon Hunter, maybe in a bit more flat damage for the Zerky styles, maybe this isn't going to be so good. But their main gimmick, okay, is when you drop a trap, you gain stealth. And that sounds kind of cool, but for most areas, especially like PvP, the stealth isn't amazing. Why? Because if you're in the middle of a fight with someone and you drop a trap, right, then you get stealth, someone procs the trap instantly, and it reveals you. And then you have revealed, and then none of your other traps are giving you stealth anyway, and it's just awful. You're always going to get the benefit of the super speed, and I think that's something that many people have kind of ignored and pushed to the side too much. The super speed can help you get away from a lot of encounters. I've outpaced many a Zerg running away while in this build, simply because of the super speed. But now that Healing Spring has changed, there's a lot more play available for escaping, because Healing Spring is a trap. It will proc the Trapper runes just as you'd want it to, but Healing Spring has no actual damage on it. So if you look at everything I've talked to you guys about today already, none of it involves dropping the Healing Spring. So when you get low, you can easily drop a Healing Spring, the enemies won't trigger it, nothing will reveal you, and you get all this wonderful stealth and super speed uptime to run in any direction you may choose, and easily get away from a lot of players. Suddenly, Healing Spring becomes a fantastic skill for disengaging. That is really, really, really strong. It doesn't just stop there, though. The trap runes as well, and particularly the fact you have a Healing Spring, offer you a lot of other advantages on this build. I found a lot while I was running this in World vs. World, especially if I was like in an area where people kept returning to, like waiting outside of someone's spawn, hoping to find fights. People would realize, oh, they're on a trap build, and they get scared. They don't want to engage on you, especially if you have a bunch of allies around you. You know, running this in a group is a lot of fun because it just continues to scale and get stronger and stronger the more ranges that you add. People will decide, oh, there's no way I can go and actually engage on them. I mean, when fight, but he's obviously nested the area around him, so people get scared of you and they don't want to go near you. And you have these standoffs. And on a standard trap build, it's kind of very easy to predict where someone drops their traps. One of the biggest counters to this build is a simple dodge roll. Someone will see you dropping all your traps, and then they'll just dodge roll on top. And all of them get, nullified, or they invulnerability. Invulnerability is really easy to come by. You know, a warrior can Zerk stance and walk through. A engineer can Elixir S. A guardian can renewed focus. An elementalist can misform, or obsidian flesh. There's tons of it out there. And even just a dodge roll, they'll destroy your trap. So how do you play a trap ranger? One of the biggest things that cripples it when people can just dodge roll. They see where you drop them and they dodge roll and you're fine. Well, that's where, again, the stealth comes into it. Because this trap doesn't actually do any damage, when you get in those situations, you can do something very fun. You can swiftness yourself, you can drop the healing spring far away, giving yourself stealth. No one has any idea where you went for a little while, and then you can drop all your other traps, still in permanent stealth, casually walk back to where you originally were, pop out, all without the assistance of like a thief using shadow refuge or anything like that. Pop out and oh, you're back. Now all that the enemy saw you do is disappear at the place of the healing spring, and they know that in some range, some radius, some 3-second radius-ish around the area, unless you use sword for a bit more mobility, you can get further away, there are other traps, and suddenly they have no idea where you rig the environment. I've had some seriously fun experiences moving right next to someone on a big hill, dropping traps right next to them, and they have no idea, and they can't do very much to counter you either, because of the power of this stealth, and because you can drop the first healing spring and not worry too much. Even better, this spring is still of use to you. If they hit the traps and then you go to engage them, well look, you've still got a healing spring here. If you start getting attacked, you can move back, and you can use this for its actual healing and supportive capabilities. One fairly important thing I did forget to mention on the original recording of this video is the pets. Yeah, we're relying a lot on stealth. You've got this really cool, like, permanent stealth engage where you can drop your traps wherever you like and move around, but your pet will give you away. Now, obviously the advantage here is you're rigging the environment in your favor, and you're not going to be in combat usually when this happens. Some counterplay, of course, would be to plink away at the rangers so that they are in combat. And when you stealth yourself, again, another problem is the pet will be wandering around with you, and, oh, it's revealing your position. You can stow the pet. I actually quite enjoyed this gameplay. I enjoyed the fact that stowing the pet was an actual part of the build. You will stow the pet so that people really can't see where you are. It doesn't betray your location. But even better, when you do accidentally automatically get in combat, when someone hits those traps, if you didn't already have the pet out, it will act as a pet swap without using your pet swap cooldown. So it will put poison on the pet, it will blast Call of the Wild for you, that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty fun little advantage of it. And you do want to constantly be stowing your pet, though this video may not show too many examples of that. One final thing to mention as well, this should be pretty obvious to most of you PvPers. Traps are like marks in that if someone is downstate, if someone is defeated, you can drop traps on their body and the traps will not proc. This is good for a couple of reasons. One of them I'll talk about very shortly, but the main one I'm talking about now is you can kill someone, and as long as no one else is around to proc these traps, you can drop a healing spring, or you can drop any of the other traps, and have plenty of stealth to stealth stomp them. And they can't counter you there either, so it actually does have fairly decent stomping capability as well, with very frequent stealth procs, you know, on incredibly short cooldowns. You know, just every 12 seconds you can get another 3 seconds from the flame trap, and they all stack up together. So it's great even for stomping people once you've managed to get that kill too. There's a bit more to trapping bodies as well, I'll talk about in a second. Last thing I really want to mention about the new and improved healing spring. This could be a bug. Don't get too keen on this because I think they might end up fixing it. Most traps, you can only have 1 hour at a time, like I mentioned at the start of the video. So if I place another flame trap, even though this isn't going to expire for like 1 minute 30 seconds, if I place another one, it will remove this one and drop this one over here instead, so you just can't stack tons of them up. Healing Spring is new. They didn't add that mechanic to Healing Spring. It makes the skill a ton of fun. I think it was probably an oversight from them, but basically what you can do is what you see on the screen right now. Keep dropping them off cooldown. With just a few rangers, as you can see in this footage, you can have tons of traps around, like freaking tons of traps, and they all proc as well, for what it's worth. Someone will walk through and they will trigger all of them, as you can see this elementalist doing here. Each one of them is a water field. Each one can be like double blasted with your Warhorn 5 and pet swapping. I found that when we were playing in a group, if we all balled up together, people had to walk into our bonfires, into all of our traps, and we had like tons of healing springs rolling under us, giving us, you know, massive regen, but also incredible condi cleanse. The healing springs are cleansing condis, and when you have that many in an area, yeah, so this idea of you set up your nest, your like primary nest, you know, and then you move away. When you move away, the best strategy for you, at least while this is in the game at the moment, while you're waiting and hiding, watching for someone to hit that, while you're waiting to drop your bonfire and boost your condition damage, you just kind of sit here, and it's not as passive as you think. You sit here and you continue to actively drop healing springs in the area, so when someone hits the trap, they don't just come into you on low health and all your cooldowns up. No. They also come to aggress you in an environment where you've set a ton of healing traps. Again, there's counterplay to this as the opponent, though. They don't have to engage you, and the best thing about the healing springs is these green rings. Enemies do see those, so they can see where the healing springs are, and they can see these strategies in action. They can see when you do like the stealth, oh, where did I drop the traps? If you see one of these green rings somewhere in Wild vs. Wild, you know, oh god, there's probably a ranger somewhere who's getting ready to blow me up. Be careful of traps. And, you know, this presents really fun gameplay, not just for you waiting, but as the person in the area, suddenly you're cautious and you're scared that traps are around, and you're getting ready to dodge roll, and you're just aware that you might be about to be jumped. And like, that's really fun to me. It really, really is. Alright, so a couple of little things to talk about on the video before we close off. I do want to talk a bit more about counters. You can just counter by being smart, okay? You can counter by seeing those rings, as I mentioned. There are some builds that completely poop on this, okay? Again, Invulnerables are really strong, Dodge Rolls are really strong. Elementalists using Diamond Skin, they basically can just walk in the traps and they take no damage at all. And it's quite a lot of fun, actually. My first day doing this, I was in the Obsidian Sanctum, and I killed a guy a few times in a row, and then he just came on his Diamond Skin Ellie, and that was pretty much it. However, this is why we're running Sinister. If you get a couple of Rangers doing this, the power on the Sinister will be enough to actually break through the 90% threshold, and then you can actually start killing those guys. Guardians, dropping Consecrations, and just generally really high Condi Cleanse classes will do okay. But the main thing, really, with all of this is actually a counter in the way you play the game rather than the build you're running, though those are some outstanding examples I've got for you guys, and that is one of the things I think is most fun. As for the Rangers, some other little strategies. Now you know your rotations. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do, okay? You can, if you take this to EOTM, I'm sure there will have been a little bit of EOTM footage in this video. Bridges are fantastic places to trap. You can, if you've got enough rangers, you can even try and trap like a whole Zerg. It's not going to be great because the first people at the start of the Zerg, they're never tightly enough packed. So the people at the start will proc the traps and die themselves, but then everyone else will be just fine. So you can set up lots of little nests. So if you had like 10 to 15 rangers, and I'd love to do this as a community at some point, you just have loads of little nests all over the bridge and people are just slowly trapping. You know those prank videos where someone walks into like a piece of tape across his forehead and he's like, damn it, and then he walks into another. Then he walks into another, and then another. You can kind of set that up with enough nests, and that's a pretty exciting possibility. Not just bridges, though. Think of any chokes, anywhere where groups of people or solo roamers are going to be walking through specific areas. You can take advantage of people trying to gather. You can go to like Orichalcum nodes and drop traps around those. You can be pretty sure people will go to them. You can even drop banners from your guild. This has been my favorite strategy so far. You can drop banners and most people coming out of their spawn will go, oh, there's a hero banner over there. They go to press F. Oh no, it's a trap, and you blow them up with the traps once they hit the banners. And then people will come back and they'll realize, oh, that's probably trapped, so they dodge roll next to the banners. But oh no, this time you put the traps a little bit closer to them so they get caught unawares. There's so much cool mind games you can play with this kind of stuff. Last one to really mention would be downstate players. Not only can you do it to stealth stomp people, but in a fight, if someone's downstate, you can drop a ton of traps around them and let them bleed out. If someone goes to res them, boom, they hit the nest. Or even a defeated player. If you're lucky enough to find someone who's refusing to waypoint, you can stealth up, drop a bunch of traps. He doesn't realize you've done it necessarily, and then you leave, him none the wiser. When he gets his friend to come res him, a ton of traps hit him, and you blow him up. So there you go, guys. That's the essence of the build. I hope you've enjoyed some of the footage I've shown you guys here. Would really recommend it. I think this is fun from both perspectives, and you know, more people trying this kind of cool stuff out, the better. This is just probably my favorite example of how the condition changes have enabled new builds and new possibilities, and I hope you guys are seeing it for what it's worth. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow.